Bass lovers and especially bass players, we've got a new contest for you. We're giving away an Idiot Box Effects Blower Box Deluxe pedal. Now, this is an amazing bass-specific distortion pedal with clean signal blend and a low-pass filter, so it will stick out nicely in live settings. It comes in the original box and was used just once before I received a duplicate one. It's even got some 3M dual lock strips on the back, so it's pedal board ready. To enter the contest, please send a screenshot of you recommending one episode of this podcast, your favorite interview, in a publicly viewable place. That could be an Apple Podcast review, Spotify, where you can now leave comments, or on any social media platform. Send the screenshot to our email box, 4stringspod@gmail.com. That's FOUR stringspod@gmail.com. One winner will be selected at random. And sorry, but prior winners of a 4 Strings in the Truth contest are not eligible for this one. The contest begins today, and we'll announce the winner in 1 month. Welcome to 4 Strings and the Truth. Today we are very chuffed to speak with Nate Brenner of Yards and Naytronix. Yards is a very cool indie pop dance combo that consists of Nate on bass alongside Merrill Garbus, an incredibly talented singer, songwriter, composer, and performer. They're life partners as well as musical partners, complete with a young child, and they've recently released their 6th album, Better Dreaming, on 4AD. They're in the midst of a spate of touring with their parents coming along to Kid Wrangle. And as you'll hear, Nate's been playing music in front of people since he was a toddler, and he attended the conservatory at Oberlin, a low-key hotbed of independent music superstars. He has a ton of advice and insights for playing bass and making original music. I think it's a good one, so please enjoy. Nate Brenner, welcome to 4 Strings and the Truth. I don't know if you know this, but you have the distinction of being our youngest guest to date, and I'm excited to speak with you. I've seen Yards play numerous times, and I think you and Merrill are just doing some great work to push pop music forward. Thanks for doing this. I know you're gearing up for a new album cycle. Your album, it will have come out when people hear this. One of the things I really like about Yards is you really are a band about 4 strings. You know, bass, of course, but ukulele as well. The humble beginnings, the compositional tool favored by everyone from George Harrison to Lou Barlow. And Merrill has really kind of taken the ukulele to the next level, not just in how she plays it, but also how you guys use it compositionally. So we're not going to talk too much about ukulele, but I just want to say you guys are all in on the 4-string thing, and I appreciate it. So welcome.
Thank you. There are 8 strings between the two of us in the band. So.
Exactly. I've seen Yards a number of times. One of my favorites was an early 2010s show at the Music Hall of Williamsburg. You probably, hopefully remember that. I think it was just the two of you. It might have been just the two of you and a drummer, or at that point, were you performing without a formal drummer?
We were basically touring as a duo from around 2009 through the end of 2010. And then when Who Kill came out in 2011, then we toured with 2 saxophone players.
I saw that too, Terminal 5. Yeah. That was fantastic. It was funny because I was up in the seated section at Terminal 5, and then David Byrne came in on a bicycle, as he does. He didn't bring it inside, but that's how he gets around. And so I was like, I really hadn't seen him too much out. And but I was like, of all the bands for David Byrne to come see, of course he'd come see Yards. A band that's kind of taken some of the things that Talking Heads were doing in their heyday and brought it to a new generation of people. And I know you guys ended up touring with him a bit, right?
Yeah, and I would definitely say that Talking Heads and David Brenner are the big, like definitely like our biggest influence with Tune Yards. Like a lot of times if I meet someone and they're like, "Oh, you're in a band," like what's it sound like? And I'm like, it's kind of like Talking Heads, the spirit of Talking Heads. But obviously we have Merrill on the vocals, so it's a completely different vocal style. But just the music, like to me, like the music, that's just where Talking Heads is definitely like one of my all-time favorite. Just that the groove, the creativity, the production, the songwriting. It's kind of like you can't get much better than that in pop music.
At that point, it was just the two of you. You go to the show, and Merrill's there with a floor tom and like a couple of microphones, a couple of looping pedals, and just starts a beat, loops it, starts a vocal track, loops it, kicks a song in, then you come in. And the thing is, I don't know if people would expect the bass to be so almost like dubby in its presence in this music. It's, exceptionally bass heavy dance music, pop music. And that's obviously called out to me as a bassist and as, aficionado of people who are using the bass in a new way. And it was amazing to watch. And even as your kind of combo got slightly bigger, I saw the Who Killed tour with the two saxophones. And then I think I saw it one more time. Then you had some singers as well and, a real drummer. But it was always just originating from Merrill creating this thing, with you and just going. And it was very, very impressive. And considering the sophistication of a lot of the vocal arrangements and all the things that you guys are doing, up to now, even on the new record, it's unique. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
The trees are in the meadow. The cows are in the trees. The people aren't anywhere to be found.
Well, tell me a bit about your musical upbringing. Was there a lot of music in your house growing up?
Yeah, I was lucky in that way. My dad is a piano player. Originally, he was studying classical music at Indiana University, where my hometown is Bloomington, Indiana. And then he went to the New Orleans Jazz Fest probably in 1979 or 1980. And as far as I can tell, that experience just changed his life. And I've never really heard him play classical music. So he kind of just got the fever for boogie woogie piano playing. And Professor Longhair is one of his, main influences. So my whole childhood, he was practicing this specific style of boogie woogie and some jazz, some R&B, some Ray Charles. And just at a young age, he would have me play drums, or I have an older brother, 2 years older than me. And so we were just I remember he'd pull us out onto the stage, and I'd just be playing the 2 and 4 when I was probably 4 years old.
4?
Yeah, 4 or 5 years old. Some of my earliest memories are not for the entire gig, but maybe he was playing a solo set, and then he'd call me out, and I'd just play 2 and 4 on the snare. Then I moved to the bass when I was about 12 or 13, and then we're just with my dad and my brother, just every weekend we'd be like, okay, we're playing this wedding, we're playing anything, everything. Maybe it was a Bloomington concert series, but I was playing a lot of really throughout high school, just every weekend we'd have gigs. And at the time I was like, great, I can save up, buy a Nintendo 64, So he'd hire us, which was great because he probably could have gotten away for, making us play for free. But my dad would get a gig and then hire me. And then I would, at the end of the summer, I'd buy some video games or whatever,
You were gigging with your dad as a tween.
Yeah, all the time.
Young teenager.
And my mom was like really supportive too. But definitely when I was a teenager, I realized that if I was practicing the bass, I could get out of doing just about everything, get out of doing the dishes, doing laundry. So it was kind of like a hack that I learned from with my dad. So like basically every night I was like, oh, I need to go practice. And then I wouldn't have to do the dishes. I wouldn't have to do any chores. And so I still don't know how to do chores 30 years later. But
now that excuse, does that work with Merrill, that excuse?
No, I was going to say the ironic thing is now that I have a son who's, 3.5, all I do is chores, and I don't know how. So it's kind of like, it sort of like backfired where now I'm like, every night I'm just like doing the dishes, like cooking dinner. And so it's like a really funny thing because I'm like, it will catch up with you sometime in your life. But I'm glad that I had that, those years of being able to practice, and I've talked about it with my dad. Like sometimes I'm like, I don't know how to do laundry. I got out of doing anything because if I could practice, I wouldn't have to do any chores. And he was like, yeah, you should thank me. So he was like, you're playing the bass now. You're not, like washing dishes or whatever. So, but I see both sides because I'm like, well, it would have been probably good to find a balance where, probably if it were up to my mom, probably I could do a little of each, like practice for 20 minutes and then do the dishes or whatever. So, but just with my dad's like love for music, he really valued, spending time at the instrument like more than anything really. So, and he's still like that. Like he's just like with Leo, my son, when he was turned 2, he bought him like the Questlove drum set and just, just like kind of like constantly wanting to share his joy for music with me, So it was a great childhood. Definitely.
No water in the water fountain. No wood in the wood stock. And you say, oh yeah, what you doing there? Nothing much to do when you're going nowhere. Woo-ha, woo-ha. Gotcha, we're gonna get the water from your house. Nothing feels like dying, like the drying of my
So
skin.
I was going to ask if your parents were like thrilled, sarcastically, when you said, hey, I'm going to go to Oberlin. And I believe you're in the conservatory program, the formal music program at Oberlin.
I went to Indiana University for my freshman year, but I never was able to pass the audition. So I was planning on going to IU because it was basically like a classical audition. And I was just like, oh, I'm a jazzer. I'm not, like I've just been like walking.
You weren't able to pass the Oberlin audition or the
IU audition.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I didn't realize it was that strict.
Yeah, so it was, I was like, oh, surely they'll let me in because I was like playing in high school. I went to Bloomington South. And so like every year we'd have these like high school jazz festivals. And so I was in fact, I was even winning awards at some of these festivals. And so I was definitely like, oh, I'm going to go to IU, like it will be no problem. And then I didn't pass the audition. And then I went to IU for the first year, just like basically working up to pass the audition in the spring. And then I didn't pass 2 years in a row. And so then I transferred to Oberlin for my sophomore year, which is, I'm really, grateful that I was at Oberlin. It wasn't my intentions to go there originally. So, but it was all good, just getting away from my hometown. I think it was good for me too, to, just play even with, like, I love my dad, but when I was at IU, I was like still playing with him every weekend. And so it's good to kind of,
he didn't want you to leave.
Exactly. But to, develop my own musical world, because with my dad, especially as a boogie woogie piano player, like he plays a lot with his left hand. So it doesn't really give a bass player room. You sort of have to double the left hand. So it was, getting to be kind of hard because I didn't want to double his left hand anymore,
I've heard you say that you don't like the Doors because they didn't generally have a bassist. And
oh, really? Yeah.
Same
I
scenario,
probably said something like that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Oberlin, I assumed you tried out for the conservatory when you transferred, right?
Yeah.
Well, that school, whether conservatory or Gen Pop, has quite the musical legacy. And especially like underground and independent music, okay? You got Liz Phair, you got my fellow Scarsdalian Chris Brokaw, who helped actually discover Liz Phair and is like one of the sort of, you probably know who he is, like just incredible guitarist and singer-songwriter. You got John Fine, Don Caballero, and Bitch Magnet. John McIntyre, Tortoise and Sea and Cake. Karen Owen, Brian Chase from Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Greg Saunier from Deerhoof, Soo-Young Park, Seam. I could go on. But like, what's going on in the water there?
That's a great question, and I really don't know. I think the one thing that I will say is in the jazz department, there was a definite emphasis on finding your own sound, like finding your own voice. And I think some other conservatories, I think it's more like, let's, learn these standards, like kind of, learn the repertoire versus like I remember we had like Donald Byrd come for a semester and just a lot of players that were not necessarily teachers, but were had, an incredible career as composers and musicians. So, and for me, I had the bass teacher there, Peter Dominguez, it was incredible in terms of like the foundation with the instrument, where I'm just like playing diatonic arpeggios, 3 octaves on the upright bass, and like all these things that it's like no one wants to do that, really, But he's basically just like, a lot of these kids are just kind of like, they're hot in their high school, they're big fish in small ponds, so to speak, and then you show up at Oberlin and he's just like back to the fundamentals, like which was really important for me. And I think the great thing with Peter Dominguez too is like he was definitely like, bass is bass, like whether it's electric or upright, because I know a lot of other schools might have been anti-electric. Like I definitely was on upright the whole time I was there, but since I've moved on, like he's emailed me, hearing me through tune yards and being like, it's the bass, like it's just like there's something about the bass, whether it's upright or electric, where it just feels like it's like the heartbeat of the music. And so I think like having that experience at Oberlin, just where you're playing bass every day, we're rehearsing every night, only doing music, it was like the dream, at the time.
I could be the sunlight in your eyes, couldn't I? Squinting at the sun up in the sky, couldn't I? Couldn't I?
Merrill created, Bird Brains, the first record, pretty much on her own, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't believe you're on that.
No,
Even
all
though there's some
solo.
very remarkable bass on that. Some, Sunlight's bass line is very key to the song and stuff. But she was like DIYing it, working with like a Tascam and recording herself on like a voice recorder, right?
Yeah.
And teaching herself how to multi-track. Personal question, but were you guys a couple before you were in the band, or like kind of simultaneous?
We were a couple before I was in the band, and I think for both of us, we were wanting to not be in a band together, actually. Because, just like especially for me, for having, heard Bird Brains, and I was like, oh, you don't need anyone. Like, I was just so blown away by Bird Brains. And at the time for me, I was like so into just like improvised music, like where I was like kind of like, I don't want to just like play the same song every night, I wanted to jam, and I was playing a lot more upright. And I think it was 2009, Dirty Projectors asked her to open for them in Europe. And then she asked me if I wanted to play bass. And so it was probably like a 2-3 week tour. And so that was just going to be it. Like I was like, yeah, let's do it. It would be really fun. Of course, who wouldn't want to go to Europe and support Dirty Projectors, who at that time were one of my favorite bands. It still are. But I was like blown away by Bitte Orca, their album. And Merrill was like, they're playing big rooms, so she wanted a bass to fill out the sound. And so she invited me. And then at the end of the tour in Europe, Dave invited Tune Yards to support Dirty Projectors in the US. And so when he asked us, and I was like, oh, Merrill can definitely do it, but I don't think I'm going to do it. I'm going to let her, do her own thing. And I had some other gigs booked already. And he was like, no, it's the two of you or no one. And so, yeah. And at the time, like, we were kind of like, that's kind of crazy. And then it basically just like, okay, let's do it. And I see, like, in hindsight, I think now I see what he was hearing of just how the bass really added a lot to, Merrill's music. And at the time I was just really afraid of, I don't want to like step on your toes. Like, this is your thing. Like, and now I'm like, oh, the chemistry between the two of us, the room, there's so much room for the bass. It really was, it kind of took someone who we trusted, from the outside to be like, oh, this is like, you guys got something going that's like really special.
So how did it go from then like live accompanist to collaborator? I mean, how has that arc gone over the course of, you guys have made Tune Yards has released 6 albums, 5 of which you're on, right?
Yeah.
So how does it change over the span of those?
When Bird Brains came out, and after that Dirty Projectors tour, up until Who Kill came out, we probably played 300 shows in 100 days or something. And it was probably, a year or so of touring. And then every night, we didn't have a lot of time on stage for sound checks, but that's how we started writing a lot of Who Kill. So we would just be like Merrill would make a beat or something, and then I'd come in with the bass line. So we were able to really start writing Who Kill from the road. And so when we went to the studio to record Who Kill, we only, spent like 3-4 days, maybe less, maybe like 2 days. But it was like a very quick album. Most of the songs we had already played live.
So they were written at like sound check and then you'd try them out that night or whatever?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, living
I
the
don't know
dream.
if there still is, but at one point I saw a video on YouTube of us playing Gangsta for the first time. It was in like Kansas or Lawrence, Kansas or somewhere. But it
I'll
was
try
like,
to track that down.
yeah. And we're wearing Tune Yards t-shirts. Like it was just like early days. Yeah. I think I was wearing like sweatpants, a Tune Yards t-shirt, but it was the first time we played Gangsta and everyone went crazy in the audience. So it was great. Cause I think it's harder for a band that's more, now that we're a little more established, it's kind of harder to test songs out live. I think you kind of have the album cycle where you go on tour, you record an album. Sometimes we'd have to write new songs because we didn't have a long enough set, Like,
The stakes are higher now too. So like you're headlining now, my understanding is the last several years.
Yeah.
And you got 6 albums to draw material from, and people are paying really good money in a shitty economy to come see you guys. And, they want to hear the songs they want to hear. There's lots of expectations now. So tell me about the composition for Better Dreaming, which is your new album. Was that markedly different than how you did the last few albums, like Sketchy and such, in terms of like the interaction between you two and the songwriting?
The biggest difference is just because we had a kid, we basically just like didn't have time the way we used to, which actually made it feel more like Who Kill in a way where we're just like, I feel like we kind of got a little maybe out of hand in the last couple albums where we're just like, oh, we have, we can spend as long as we need to make this album, just like wait till we feel it, or what I mean? Instead of like, no, you can't wait for anything. You have an hour, then you have to pick up your kid from daycare. So in that hour, we're going to like write and record a song. Before it would be like, oh, I can't even warm up in an hour, So it was just like that. And I think it's a really good thing for especially artists, maybe in their later, like I'd consider myself kind of like later in my career, although I am still very young, but just, we've been making it, like you said, it's like our 6th album. So it's kind of like maybe mid-level career, where I think it's really good to have these kind of limitations where you can easily get out of hand, where you're just like, oh, I'm going to spend like 5 years making one record, instead of just like, no, like have this sort of, find that urgency that you had when you were younger. And then the other thing is, because we did so much scoring for,
Right.
we, especially with I'm a Virgo, the Boots Riley TV show, where we wrote so much music, we were just kind of like in that habit of just like, okay, like keep moving, no perfectionism. Let's just like, write like 50 songs in the next year or something. And just, basically just try not to get too bogged down with the details. One take is fine.
It's giving me a heart attack, we jump so high but fall right back. Giving me a heart attack, don't let me lose my soul. Giving me a heart attack, we jump so high but fall right back. Giving me a heart attack, don't let me lose my soul.
I think I mentioned to you when I reached out to you that I actually took a remote songwriting course with Merrill last year, which I hope she had fun teaching, because it was really actually eye-opening. I'd never done anything like that before. She was very enthusiastic about people having a regular practice, whether it's journaling or lyrics or stuff, having a regular practice. And one of the assignments was make a mistake and then build a song around the mistake, which is something that, I've heard you guys do over the years. In the song Heart Attack, for instance, where the piano part starts, you hear, a chord that sounds like someone's, like it's not a chord, it's like a mistake, but it becomes part of the pastiche of the song. And now you can't hear the song without that mistake. Turning mistakes into hooks is something uniquely Tune-Yards. And I was appreciative to learn that, because it kind of gives you permission to go at your own mistakes. And I know that she likes things sometimes. She said she likes things where like it's a riff, but she does it wrong once, and then she likes the wrong version. So she keeps making the same mistake in the recorded version, which is to say, in reading about the new record, I understood that you guys did take more of a kind of like first thought, best thought, whatever works, let it roll. It feels like you did get back a bit to the spirit of some of the earlier stuff, where we build a foundation around something that was kind of unusual, and it might even sound quote unquote wrong to a listener.
And I think for me, I feel like finally I've forgotten all the theory I learned at Oberlin. And because I do think it maybe it's helpful to have, kind of both, like where like if you're in a band and some person is like all theory, the other's like all feeling and emotion and stuff. And I think for me, it was like going to Oberlin, it was, you learn a lot of music theory. And then when I graduated from Oberlin, I actually had a job working for Pandora as a music analyst. And I ended up working there for 10 years from 2006 to 2016 from remotely, which actually was one of the reasons why Tune-Yards was able to go on tour all the time without making any money. Because, it's just like where you can still like basically like have a job, working remotely. And so like, because obviously like a lot of opening gigs are pay very poorly.
Yeah.
But all to say, like working at Pandora was a lot of like technical stuff, like, okay, what's the tempo of the song? Like how many sections are there? What's the range of the melody? What's the instrumentation? And so like, I feel like for me, I feel for the first time, I'm like, finally I'm like not analyzing everything and not thinking about theory, and just like it in a really good way. Like obviously it's good to know music theory, but there, to a certain extent, I think it will hinder your ability to just like create music more from the place of like even following your ear or your heart, like where you're just like, this is emotional, because it's like, no, it's just C major, that's too simple, or you're always like using theory as a way to prove that you're not a good songwriter or something. It's been great working with Merrill, because like she doesn't really care about theory or think about it. It's just so much, she has just an incredible ear, which she developed because her mom's a classical piano player, and so she grew grew up, just like listening to her mom practice and teach lessons and stuff. So it's kind of just like more intuitive for her. And I feel like now I'm like, okay, I've kind of like let go of any trying to analyze whatever I'm doing and just, kind of try to create, allowing myself to just like play music instead of like being super critical from like a, analyzing it place or something.
So you're turning off the naysayer in the head and it's just more about feel and like what just like moves your body or whatever.
Exactly. Which also, ties into not having a lot of time. It's like as soon as, our son was born, we didn't have any time. We weren't getting any sleep, as any new parent knows. And I realized, I was like, oh, what if I don't have time to have negative thoughts? What if I don't have time to be critical on my own bass playing? What if I actually love my bass playing? Like all these things that I recognized in myself it was like a way to have a huge reset, like where you're just like, oh, this is like an epic reset in my life. And I'm just going to let go of like the old Nate who was just like, you're out of tune. And I'm like, oh, I have a tuner. I am into, no, you're out of tune. Like, sometimes like I remember just like checking the tuner 20 times during a set or something and just like letting go of this fear of just like not sounding good. It's just kind of like, no, just like play music and have fun and not be so self-critical and stuff.
You guys did like a CBS Saturday morning recording with just the two of you, right? And that was recent, and it's like on TV, and it is a pretty naked setting, so it must take some energy to turn off the self-doubt machine in the head when you're doing it.
I remember going on tour when our son was only 7 months old or so, just like, and then you're just like, you get, maybe we were playing like an after party in Chicago, so you get home at 2-3 a.m. to the hotel. He wakes up at 4, like you're just like not getting any sleep. And so you're just like, okay, I have no time to doubt myself anymore or worry about the tone, or I don't have time to like worry about this stuff anymore. Like I sound great. I'm just going to play it, it kind of like gave me this like newfound level of confidence. And also you're like, oh, like this little creature has to survive. Like it kind of put it in perspective, you know what I mean? Like if I play a wrong note, no one's going to die, hopefully.
Hey, you could build a new song around it.
Exactly.
So on the new album, there's the single Limelight. Feels like a Parliament Funkadelic track when it comes in, that vocal melody that she's doing. It's just like, it's like a party track. When you guys come up with something like that, is it because we're going for a hit or we're going for a dance floor banger? Or is that just like one of the 3 songs we wrote that day?
It's both. It's a little of both. Like, I think it's like we made a playlist for our son to dance to or eat anything to, I say dance because he'd immediately start dancing. And I had like a little Bluetooth speaker, and I would play Atomic Dog, Talking Heads, like George Clinton, Bootsy, like this sort of like core funk and R&B and stuff where you're kind of like, oh, what do I want to share with someone who's never heard music before? Because he is a toddler, then he wanted to hear that George Clinton song 20 times in a row for the next 3 months, so then it became like, I feel like a lot of it really seeped into the new Tune Yards album, like where we're just like, oh, this is like sounding like a George Clinton song, like just because like we've been listening to this George Clinton song on repeat. So it didn't. I don't think we're ever like oh, we're gonna write a hit or anything, because it kind of like I feel like that would just backfire. But I think more like when you're listening to this certain kind of, for us it was maybe like 80s like R&B. Sort of pop music, then that translated into the new music. So it kind of just like seeped in there.
noticed in another interview you did that I think it was the Creative Control, which is with Vish. He's great, and I think he asked you to recommend a song from your then current album, and you said, "Let's play Under Your Lip," and then Merrill changed it to the single. Is Under the Lip sort of like a sleeper banger for you on that record? And if so, what would be the sleeper banger on the new record?
On this album, to me, the title track, Better Dreaming, like I think that might be the best Tune-Yard song of all time, actually.
Wow.
But I think the other one, it's called Never Look Back, that is also one of my favorite. It's really helpful to have in this case, it's a 4AD, our record label.
Right.
And then they can say like, oh, this is the single. And then we're like, thank you, because like we have no idea, Yeah. So I really feel like we just kind of like put our trust in them in promoting the music.
And there's only two of you, so there's no deciding vote. Switching to gear now, we like to talk about gear, but we don't get like, into the weeds about it. Every time I think I've seen you, you're playing that red Precision. I assume it's a Precision bass. And it seems like that's your thing, right? Have you been switching it around?
Well, if you recall the CBS show, I was playing that white Fano bass. The Fender Precision bass I bought in like 2006, right before, actually Merrill asked me to tour with her other band, Sister Suvi.
Okay.
And at that point, I played a lot of electric like in high school, but when I went to Oberlin, I was just like on upright, like nothing else. And so I bought this like P bass it was like $500 at Best Music. And it's like, that's the one that's just been with me ever since. And like, it's kind of like the thing where I've actually like tried to find other basses. Like I'm like, oh, I should buy like another bass, like maybe get a nicer one. And then I always just go back to the P bass. Like I think it's just basically become like my voice.
Right.
So, and I know it's like I remember doing a session at the BBC in London, and the engineer was like, not the best sounding bass, is it? And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like it's not, it's like there are plenty of basses that sound better. I agree with you, but it's like my bass. It's kind of like, I know how it sounds. I know how I can, make it sound good. And I've, what pedals to use, whatnot. And it's just like a workhorse. Like it's like been on, hundreds of flights. It's been dropped. There's all kinds of it's beat up, and it's like in tune. It's it's great.
Yeah, they can take a beating.
Exactly.
By the way, that's a very English engineer thing to say. Not the best sounding bass.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm here playing, you're behind the board, we're good.
Yeah, exactly. But and I will say that like the Fano bass, it's a J4.
Okay.
I used that more on the new album than I did the P bass, actually.
Ah.
And so one of the things I realized is that the Fano has a tiny bit more low end, and so it's kind of like with the P bass, I have to boost it a little bit in the EQ, and the Fano usually it's just like, oh, you don't have to do anything, and it sounds like really good. Obviously, we still do a lot of stuff to it, but but the thing with the Fano is that it's really noisy when we play in a small rooms where they have like lights. Like it has this like really loud buzz in certain situations. Like it's like the pickups are like really big, and it's like I feel like it picks up like radio frequencies or something, or you know what I mean?
Like Spinal Tap.
Yeah, exactly. And so we were just doing a promo tour in Europe, like 3 weeks ago. And it was like we were playing this like radio station in Brussels, and I was just like, oh, it's just so noisy. I can't. I guess I can't tour with this bass. I can't bring it anymore, even though I like the way it feels and the way it sounds like in the studio, probably more than the P bass. So it's like I'm back to the P bass. But on that trip when I flew over there, my bass case, like the handle broke off. And so it was like for the handle to break off, like I think someone had to like drop the bass, And so Merrill was like, maybe it's a sign that, you shouldn't tour with the Fano because it's like because it's a lot more like, you know, nice or expensive or whatever than the P bass. So she was like, it's a sign you need to keep touring with the P bass, and because it's the P bass has been dropped a million times and it hasn't gotten broken.
You wouldn't even notice.
Exactly.
And then you've always played with your fingers, I assume. I don't think I've heard any. Do you play with a pick at all?
Yeah, I've never really played with a pick. I've like a couple times, like I've been in like a few situations where I'm playing in someone else's band and they're like, "Oh, can you play this song with a pick?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and then they'll be like, "Actually, go back to your fingers." Like, you didn't tell me you didn't know how to play with the pick, you know.
And what about strings? Because in your case, let me guess, you're using flat wounds.
Yeah. I've been using flat wounds ever since, you know, like 2005 or so. When I first got the P bass, like I really tried to set it up like a upright in terms of just like the action was like really high, and then over the years I've just like it gets a little lower every year, you know. But I put on round wound. Like I have a jazz bass that I put on round wounds that I used a lot for. When we were scoring, I'm a Virgo. There's I have a Rickenbacker that I've used on some, I think like a song on I Can Feel You Creep. I used that on one of those songs on, like I have like maybe, you know, 4 or 5 basses that I'll kind of just try, like, especially just for like songwriting. I like to, I'll try this like different bass. Like I have a D'Angelico hollow body one that I might just like, you know, you'll come up with a different line maybe with a bass that you're not quite as comfortable with. So it's almost like a songwriting tool to just like grab a different instrument.
And then effects-wise, I mean, you know, I never really thought about it too hard. I heard some Dirt, you know, I think Gangster on the album, but it sounds like you're also now like you're doing like more stuff with like a Pog, you know, an octave pedal, and how big is your rack now?
When I tour, it's basically like I have like 2 different types of distortion, because I used to just have like one overdrive pedal, and then I'd like crank up the drive for Gangster and then like dial it back down for, you know, like Business or one of the other early songs. But versus like now I'm just like, this is my like super heavy distorted pedal. Then I have like kind of like a light overdrive pedal. Then I have the Pog, and then I have envelope filter, and then I have a tremolo. And so that's just for like the live, you know, my just kind of like a small, I mean, a relatively small board. I guess it's kind of big for bass standards, but like when I'm recording, we'll grab whatever, you know, pedals around. Like sometimes it's chorus or a sub octave. And then, but the one thing that I will say that I've been doing a lot, and I actually, you can probably hear it on Limelight if you listen closely, is I actually played the electric bass and then I doubled it with a synth bass and just like blended it in there.
I noticed some sort of effect on the intro. I thought it might just be reverb, but okay, so it's like a double. That's kind of cool.
And there probably is a handful of effects on top of that. But the one thing that I've been getting really into is like, so like say I'll record a bass line, say on the P bass or the Fano or, you know, whatever, like record the entire song. And then in Pro Tools, I'll take that audio file, move it down into a MIDI track, and then send the MIDI to a synth. And then while the track's playing, I can kind of like do some tweaks on the synth to kind of get the different filters and different stuff going. And then you can kind of blend those in together. So it's like sometimes I'm not even like playing the bass part with my, you know, right or left hand, but the bass, like my bass playing is, you know, essentially like triggering the synth, and then I'm able to just like tweak with some of the sounds on the. Mostly it's like a Prophet 6 that I've been using.
I mean, you guys are very self-taught in your studio approach, right? Did you study like Pro Tools or studio work at Oberlin, or was it mostly just playing?
At Oberlin, there was one semester where I took music technology. That was like the first time I learned Pro Tools, or at least was like introduced to it. And then immediately I was just like hooked on it. And I think that it might have been like my last year there. So then it was like, I remember like probably my dad, bought, like, I'm sure, because I probably didn't have any money at the time, but I feel like my dad probably bought me like a laptop with the M-Box. And that was like just incredible just to have, where you're just like, basically like recording yourself. And before then I was like using like a MIDI disc recorder with a mic and like, all this stuff now where even you can just like record on your phone. But back then it was like, if you had a M-Box, like that was huge, like one mic and an M-Box, come on. It's like you're living like a king.
Mr. Divine, you realize that you got them right. What did
Let's speak a bit about Naytronix, which is the name of the solo project through which you've released the most records, right? I think 4 albums so far?
Yeah, 4 albums, yeah.
Yeah, that's dedication. That's not just like, oh, the bass player is going to go do his own thing. You have a whole separate catalog of music. I know Merrill sometimes appears on some of this stuff. What's the musical itch that Naytronix scratches?
I don't have the itch as much anymore, especially once we started scoring. But I think originally the itch was the pop world, that at least the world that I live in is a lot of like, you spend a year, 2 years, 3, whatever, many years recording like 10 songs. And then you're going to spend the next year, 2 years performing those songs like over and over again. Right. And so for me, I loved recording so much, just like, and so Naytronix kind of became like, oh, like we're home from tour for, 3 days, 4 days, we have this studio, so I can just like ride my bike down, come in, make a beat, make anything, track some drums, track a drum machine, track some bass, track a synthesizer, just kind of like really a vehicle for creativity. It felt like essential for me because we're just, not that it's like in any way like I'm getting like stuck with tune yards, but just as a way to be like keep just like developing just my own sort of form of like creative outlet and stuff.
When you start a song, when you're working on your solo stuff, do you like start from one instrument? Do you start from synth, or is it still originally on the bass, or kind of how do the songs come to you musically?
If I had a default method, it would be like, start with some kind of beat, whether it's me tracking myself playing the drums or tracking a drum machine or some kind of, rhythmic element. It could be a loop of hand claps or anything. And then immediately go to the bass and then start like improvising some bass lines. So I'd say that would be my default, but I'd say that I intentionally try not to do that. Maybe you come up with something creative by doing something that you wouldn't normally do. Like, so for me, that might mean starting out on the piano, writing some chords, because that's like not what I'm most comfortable with. Just like a weird drum setup, like where I'm like, okay, I'm going to just do like one snare drum and a crash cymbal or like something like really just like not normal, or like, in other words, like I feel like I'm always trying to escape my default method, which essentially is a beat and bass.
Yeah, of course, right?
Yeah, totally.
This is just incontrovertible proof of worry-free evil practices. They're turning.
You guys did the score for Sorry to Bother You, the series I'm a Virgo,
Yeah.
you both Boots Riley projects, and now you have an upcoming one as well, right? I
Right.
Love Boosters.
Yeah.
Tell me about the relationship with Boots, because he said something really interesting, which is the fact that you guys are both in Oakland kind of has helped nourish the collaboration. Does he just like come by and like knock on the studio door and say, "Hey guys, making a new movie"? Like, how's it work?
So we live walking distance from each other. And so when we were working on Virgo, he would come over we'd put Leo to bed. He was going to bed from, 8 p.m. or something. So Boots would come at 8:30, probably 2 nights a week. And then we'd play him everything we were working on, and he'd have notes. We'd like take notes, and then it was like very much like he was like very involved, like because it was so easy because he lived close by. For this movie, unfortunately, like they were in LA during the fires, so he and the editor evacuated. But the fortunate thing was then he rented a room in our studio. So we're like in a,
Living in your studio, you're saying?
Yeah. But there were a good, probably like January, February, probably like 3 months he was working across the hall. So he could just come in, listen to what we were doing. Sometimes he'd, while I'm like, oh, I'm tracking this. I've been playing a lot more upright, since we started scoring, but I could be like, "Hey Boots, what do you think of this?" And he'll be like, "Nah." And I'm like, "Great. Then I don't have to record it for, I don't have to spend the next 2 hours trying to record it." But just that immediate feedback has been, incredible. So, and he has just the best ideas. He's always just really pushing us to take it one step further. So it's been a great, it's just a highlight of my life for sure, definitely.
I would think it would be very validating to have an artist of his caliber embrace you guys and want to work with you on multiple projects.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. We totally understand. If you want to hire anyone, it's it's kind of it's already been, basically just oh, that's fulfilled this beyond our wildest dreams. If I was 20 or something and someone's "You're going to score a film," I'd be like, "Are you serious?" No way. It's just kind of a, bigger life goal than I ever allowed myself to have, basically. And the other thing I'll say about Boots is he has had to fight for us too. Cause I think a lot of times a producer's "Oh, you need a known composer," or they don't have enough experience. So he's really had to fight just to allow us to work with him. So, which makes it even more special, I think.
Heartbreak, 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 heartbreak. Unlock the corners of my little mind.
And then the upcoming tour that you guys are doing, it seems like you're choosing to play kind of more intimate venues as a stripped down combo. Is it just as a duo, or are you going to have?
Yeah, we're doing the duo set for this upcoming tour, and the throughout at least the tours that we do for the rest of the summer and the fall. We're back to wanting to just do the duo again. We did the duo from basically 2009 to 2010. And then, it was incredible having a bigger band. We were playing with a long-term drummer, Hamir Atwal, who's a really good friend of mine, right, who I, met in 2005 or so when I first moved to Oakland, and have been playing gigs with him ever since. He decided to move to upstate New York, and he's still playing some gigs, but he wanted to go back to school and basically which I totally get. He's I want to actually make a good living, have benefits, kind of get a real job. So
yeah,
he wanted, you can't blame anyone for that. But we just felt like it was so special what we had with him that we didn't necessarily want to just be okay, we're just going to hire a drummer. So we just wanted to, we were let's just try to develop the duo. It felt like we didn't really give it a lot of time time, actually, in the scheme of Tune Yard. Like our goal is to learn every single Tune Yard song ever recorded. We wanted to kind of give ourselves the opportunity to see what we could do, like as a duo. And we're really excited about it. Like we didn't feel like, oh, we have to go back to the duo. Like we were just like, no, like let's do the duo and like try to get like super tight with it and try to make it unique. Like, cause as soon as you have a drummer, in a way it becomes like a band instead of like when it's a duo, it's like, what is this? It's like this weird thing that, but like people are dancing, like they're into it, but it's not like, oh, it's this rock band or it's like a funk band or whatever. It's like, it becomes its own thing with a duo, which I think is like, makes it really unique. And then on top of all that, if just like the financial reality of touring these days, it's like, and we're bringing my mom, who's going to be Leo's nanny for a lot of it, and my dad's going on some of it. But so it's just like automatically you're paying for 2 more flights there, and just like the costs really add up. So.
Wait, now if your dad's coming, are you going to like kind of get like some payback and have him come on stage and like support you for like, low wage?
I wish we could, but he'll be back at the hotel having to do bedtime. So my dad actually played on Sketchy on a couple of tracks. So he's on like Nowhere Man and Make It Right, I think, on a little bit of that. So
that's so cool.
I play bass on one of his albums, and Merrill actually sings on one of his albums too. I think it's on Spotify too.
Wow. What's the name? What's his name then?
Craig Brenner.
Craig with a C? Yeah.
And the album is Passages.
Passages. Craig Brenner, Passages.
Listen for Merrill Garbus on vocals on that one.
Peace and love. Love is waiting for the feeling of discomfort to pass before killing. Peace and love. Love is waiting for the feeling of discomfort to pass before killing. Peace and love. Love is waiting for the feeling of discomfort to pass before killing. Peace and love. Love is waiting for the feeling of discomfort to pass before killing. We argue around.
For our final question, we like to ask someone like you who's been performing as a musician since they were 4 in one capacity or another. What is something you would say to a new bassist? I used to say young bassist, but I think it's new because, you could learn at any age. But what is like a good piece of advice for someone who's like picking up the bass relatively new?
It kind of falls into 2 categories. Like one is the, musical side. Like I do think it's really can be really painful, but really important to record yourself. Because I think for me, there were a lot of moments like where and even with my dad, where we were in the studio recording and, everyone's like, oh, the bass is like too staccato, like it sounds weird. And I'm like, I have no idea, like when you're just like playing the bass, you're like, oh, this sounds great. Like, and then you go to listen to the recording, you're like, oh, I sound like maybe I don't sound great after all. Like, and so it's like really important to start recording yourself. And then I think you'll be able to hear like how you kind of like, be aware of how you actually sound, like not how you think you sound. And that still happens to me today. Like when we were doing this promo tour in Brussels, we were playing Limelight, and I remember I was like, oh, Merrill, I think you started the loop a little early on Limelight. Like we got off, and then she was like, I don't know, like let's listen to it. And we listened to it, and I was like, oh, that was me. Like, you know what I mean? So even for like, I think it's good for the beginner, good for the advanced, good for everyone. It's just like the more you record, the more you're kind of aware of your own weaknesses. But to that degree, like kind of the non-musical side is like, it's like really important to be aware of your weakness without getting too hard on yourself, even where maybe you're in a band and someone's like, oh, you're too staccato or whatever, like not take that personally, like not let it, because we're all, as bassists and musicians, I think we're generally like pretty sensitive people, just as we express music. So you kind of have to be sensitive in a way, but you kind of have to have like really thick skin though. Yeah. So it's like, what I say is like, don't take anything personally. Like it's all about about the music. Like, it's not about us. And I think it's like, so you have to really be able to take criticism without it really like affecting you, where you want to keep getting better, keep moving forward without like hating your playing even. So it's like this weird, so you have to record yourself to know what you can improve on. But then when you listen to yourself, you don't want to like hate the way you sound so much that you don't want to keep going. So it's like finding that, that sweet spot, which I think the way to do it maybe is like to, record yourself quite often. So then you can be like, oh, I'll go back and like, actually, I sound better than I did like 3 months ago or 2 years ago or whatever. But the other thing that's happening for me is like when I'll listen back to some early recordings of myself and I'm like, oh, I actually sound pretty good. But at the time I didn't think so either. So, it's it's kind of helpful having that. So that would definitely be the biggest thing, and especially like, I guess the downside now, I was going to say like everyone has phones so they can record, anytime they practice. But the downside is you have to also be able to put your phone down so you can actually practice.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, when you're talking about recording, you're not saying everyone should have like a Pro Tools setup or, whatever, Audacity rolling. You just mean like put your phone down, press, I'm an Android guy. I use whatever the onboard sound recorder is. And when I come up with an idea, and I'm always rolling it, and then I'll listen back. And then before I go near trying to capture something on Pro Tools or something, just like
exactly. Yeah, you can use voice memos, everything.
Right.
But the thing that's great about if you're able to use Pro Tools or Logic or anything, then you have the benefit of having the click track, which is also like that's a whole other skill that's important for especially like a young bass player. Like you got to be able to play in time. So. And I think that the challenge like these days is like anyone can just like quantize themselves, and it loses that. To me, it loses the feel, like the pocket, the group. Like I like to, not nudge around anything, just like try to, or you know what I mean. Just like you got it. That's like what makes it musical, and so that's kind of the thing. Like when you're first starting out, you really have to play with the metronome, and ideally find a teacher too. Because
all right, now you got 4 tips for a new bassist. Okay, we got self-record, don't beat yourself up, play to a metronome, and find a teacher. I'm a big believer in human teachers. I had a very weird one when I was starting out in high school, and he would eat like, tuna fish out of a can before our lessons, and I didn't have a great experience with him. But I do think there is a lot of value to a human. You can learn a lot of stuff on YouTube these days, but sometimes it's great to get real-time feedback from a human in a room with you, as long as they're not eating tuna fish out of a can right before the
No tuna fish. Yeah. The good thing about having a teacher is like if they're a good teacher, they'll zone in and be like, this is what you need to work on. This is your strength. This is your weakness, which is hard to do, without a teacher, because generally we'll probably just like keep working on what we're good at. Because no one wants to sound bad ever. But if you have a teacher, they'll be like, okay, you sound great at this. So what about this thing? Like whatever that might be. So you can really, just get better. So, which is like the definite benefit of having a teacher. So I think for every young bass player, find a teacher. For every old bass teacher, find a student.
Well, that's what kids are for. Nate, thank you so much for all your time today. Really appreciate bringing up the kind of youthful edge of 4 Strings and the Truth. Looking forward to seeing you guys on the road, and everyone should go out and see you guys as a duo or a sextet, however you perform. And we'll see you out there.
And thank you, Sandy. And again, not to keep talking, but I am 42. So for all the younger bass players, you got plenty of time out there, because I'm the young one. So that says a lot, right? You got a lifetime.
Well, we're talking to the bassists who, the whole precept of the show is that the music, by virtue of what they did, they're changing the music that came after them, which is a lot to hold on your shoulders. But, you guys for pop music, you're doing things that no one else is doing on the bass. And
thank you.
So I feel like you belong in a pantheon. We're expanding the pantheon this season, or second season. But we're still also going to have some of my like core old school guys who are just like, who are now in their 70s, maybe not doing a ton of interviews and stuff, but they have a lifetime of amazing wisdom and stories. So I'm not ageist in either direction.
No, it's an honor. It's an honor to be the young whippersnapper here.
Well, thank you so much, Nate.
Thank you, Sandy.
So that was a lot of fun, and I'm really grateful to spend some time getting behind Tune-Yard's unique sound and approach. As always, feel free to send questions and comments to our email box, 4stringspod@gmail.com. That's FOUR stringspod@gmail.com. Like, review, blah, blah, blah. But don't forget to send in your screenshots to that very same email box so you can enter to win the coveted, like new, Idiot Box Blower Box Deluxe pedal. Make sure your post recommending one of our episodes is publicly viewable, and I wish you luck. Thanks again for listening.
Audiation.